fine that you have your own citations. Those are
Do
your...
you have anything that disagrees with that?
Right, I disagree with that.
No. Do you have any evidence that that's not how it's used in philosophy?
No, I'm not arguing about how it is used in philosophy. I'm arguing that their use is wrong.
Okay, well, one step at a time, because, again, my argument is, first, not if it's right or wrong, because those are value judgments. I am stipulating that anybody can go look at this and see that if you go read the literature, right, the academics for the last couple of 100 years, if you read a paper, when you see the word atheism or atheist, it's best understood by the context of the writer that it is someone who believes that God doesn't exist, or that the belief that God does not exist, right, if you're atheist and you're the person. So do you accept that, typically speaking, in philosophy, in the academia, that's how that word is typically used, right or wrong? Do you agree that that's how it's typically used?
I would have to agree with you. I haven't read your literature, but I'd have to agree with you that that's how it's used. Okay,
so let's move on from there then. Okay, I want that established, because, again, a lot of atheist channels don't put that information out there. They maintain there's only one usage. They'll say that words are polysemous, but then they'll say, oh, but we're already using...
Let's talk about us instead of talking about other people.
All right, so to your argument about me being atheist, the problem is that you can mirror that very easily. I have a proof out there. Anybody can go look at it. It's on www.greatdebatecommunity.com. It's under atheism equals agnosticism equals weak theism. And let me explain what I mean by this. If given the proposition of theism is God exists, right? If you don't affirm that, you're suggesting that makes you a weak atheist, and you're just calling that atheism, correct?
Okay, I'm trying to follow, just so you know.
All right, I'll say it again. I just like you, and I respect you for this. You don't want a straw man, neither do I.
Right.
And I love that kind of conversation, because what's the point of arguing and defending a straw man, right? Yeah. So if the proposition is God exists, the theist affirms that, right? The theist says, I believe that to be true. They believe God exists. That's the predicate of the proposition. So the proposition is God exists. The predicate is belief. So when I use the notation BP, that means believes the proposition. So the theist affirms that. They say, yes, ontologically there exists a God out there somewhere in the universe, somewhere in the reality, God exists. Would you agree that's what a theist would do?
Not necessarily. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
The key word that's important is believe. If the proposition is a God exists, the theist believes the proposition, believes a God exists.
Yes.
It's important that it's very extremely important that you do not skip over the word belief.
I'm not. I mean, we all have beliefs.
You are. I'm just saying
you have beliefs, right? I mean, you believe that I exist, right?
I believe you exist, yes.
Okay, so a theist believes God exists, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know where we're having a disconnect then.
No, there's no disconnect. I'm just saying that it's important that we say belief.
Okay, so you can say belief, you can say think, you can say affirm. They're all the same thing.
Those are two different things.
They all indicate the same thing. The theist affirms the proposition. That means the propositional attitude is belief. So when you affirm a proposition, you believe it. When you disaffirm it, when you say that it's not true, you disbelieve it. So if I say I believe P, that means I'm affirming the propositional content to be the case. Okay. If I disbelieve P, that is saying that I think the propositional content is false. And again, there are atheists out there that when they say disbelief doesn't mean that. They say disbelief is just not believing. That goes against everything that you ever read in Logic 101 and Philosophy 101 and what's called propositional attitude.
Your sources.
Yeah, and if you have any other sources that disagree with mine, present them, because I'll present mine if you wish. Or you can accept them arguendo. I don't mind.
I can just present my argument. I mean, I do have my sources. I mean, it's not like I've taken a course in philosophy, but I don't think that you have to take a course in philosophy to understand the difference about belief and non-belief and knowing something and not knowing something.
That's not what I said. The word disbelief.
Meaning,
the word disbelief means that the word disbelief in the literature indicates that you are thinking that the proposition is false. Do you accept that?
Give me a second.
And again, I can show the evidence for this. If anybody wants to look at it, they can, but I'm hoping that you just take it arguendo, so I don't need to.
I disagree with disbelief.
Okay, so can I screen share then?
Sure.
Yep.
Well, we're on Zoom, so I guess we can. So, all right. So, I wrote this back when this was an article that I wrote, or a blog that I wrote. Let me see if I can screen share here. Okay. Are you seeing the screen here that I'm rolling?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, if you look at my evidence here, I'm just going to scroll at the very bottom here. Disbelief is commonly used to express a mental opposition which does not imply a blameworthy disregard of evidence, right? People say, well, I don't believe because of lack of evidence. That's not disbelief. Unbelief may simply be failure to believe from lack of evidence or knowledge. So there's a difference between belief and unbelief, and I think they get conflated. But if you actually go further, this is from Rutgers, Philosophy 101. Belief, disbelief, and suspension of judgments are three cognitive or epistemic attitudes one can take towards a proposition. These are the following. Belief. If you conclude that a proposition is true, then the appropriate attitude towards the proposition is belief. So if I think that is true, I believe P. Disbelief. If you conclude that a proposition is false, then the appropriate attitude toward that proposition is disbelief. If I think the proposition is not true or false, I disbelieve it. Then the third epistemic would be suspension of judgment. It means I don't have evaluation either way. I don't say it's P or P is true. I don't say P is false. I am unable to have a conclusion. I suspend judgment on it, and I'm agnostic on the proposition. Those are the three main epistemic states. Now, do you disagree with these? And this is Rutgers. So if you disagree with it, I would ask that you present me a source that shows this not to be the case.
Or I can use a logical argument as to why it could be incorrect. Like, why do I have to present a source?
Because I'm asking you, this is how it is in philosophy, not asking if it's right or wrong. I'm stipulating that this is how it's actually used in the literature. So if you disagree with that, then you have to show me that that's not how it's used in the literature.
That's not what I'm arguing. I am not trying to argue with you that how it's used in literature is not the way it's used. That's not my argument.
I want to make sure that. So you do agree that when I say disbelief is used that way, that is actually how it's used in the.
I'll have to take your word for it. That's fine.
All right. So let's go move on from there then, if you accept that part. So you asked me why I'm not an atheist. So again, and I don't know how this took so long to get there. God exists. If a person affirms that, they are a theist. Would you agree that?
A person that believes in God is a theist.
Okay.
If someone says there's a God and someone says I believe it, then they're a theist.
Okay. If the proposition is God exists and you don't affirm that, you would call that a weak atheist, correct?
I don't. A person that does not believe the claim of a God.
Yeah.
Yes, weak atheist.
And you're just shortening that and you're calling that atheism, right?
I'm calling that atheism.
All right. Now, let's mirror that. Now, this is where it gets into some kind of logical consistency here. Let's mirror that. If the proposition is not framed in terms of theism, let's say it's in the negation of theism. I want to take God exists and I want to reframe that as God does not exist. If you affirm that, you would agree that's atheism still. I mean, somebody who says there's no God is clearly an atheist. They clearly lack a belief, right?
Yes.
Okay. So now the theist can say, well, if you don't affirm that proposition, you're a weak theist. And then you just shorten that, and we're going to call that theism.
Because it doesn't make sense to mirror that.
It's logic.
It doesn't make sense to mirror that.
There's a dichotomy there, right? God exists or God does not exist. That's a dichotomy.
Here's the thing. You're saying that being a theist is affirming that a God exists. And you do not have to affirm that a God exists. You just have to believe it. This is the thing. You're saying that
believing and affirming means the same thing here.
You're acting as if it's completely and total equal opposites. And it's not necessarily the case, because you're not considering the third party in this, the religion. Let's just call the proposition the religion. The religion makes the claim that a God exists. So a group of people believes it, that makes them the theist.
Right.
The third party is the atheist who does not agree with it. They do not believe it. That makes them an atheist.
Okay, but you're I don't think, and I'm trying to really make it very simple, and I'm not trying to be disparaging.
No,
but
I understand. I've heard this argument before, and I don't agree with it.
But you're disagreeing with logic here. Again, would you agree, and let's start from the basics, that we're going to be framing this in classical logic? Now, I can talk about a little bit about other types of logic that I have, even though I'm not formally schooled in any of them. I just have an interest in them. But classical logic is pretty simple, right? There's a thing called the law of excluded middle. Either the proposition is true or it's false. Mm-hmm. A dichotomy would be ontologically that there is the case that God exists or it is the case that God does not exist. There's no middle ground to be had there. It's one or the other. Would you agree?
Sure.
Okay. So if you affirm that, then you are a theist. If you don't affirm it, you're saying that you're a weak atheist, or you're going to shorten that to atheist, right?
To get rid of some confusion, let's be clear about what affirm means. If you are
think that it's true.
You think it's true.
Yeah.
That God exists.
Yeah. You're
Well,
affirming the
first of all,
proposition. You're saying that the
you're a theist.
propositional content is the case. The
Say that
way it works is this. The proposition has a propositional content, and that propositional content is the state of affairs of the universe. This is called correspondence theory of truth, such that there's a fact that exists that makes something true. So why, if you say, you know, what the sky is blue, what makes the sky blue? Because it's a fact that the sky is blue, on, you know, typically speaking, there's some kind of ontological existence there that is the case that makes that proposition true, right? It's called a truth maker.
Correct.
Okay, so if God exists, then the proposition God exists is true.
True.
But the person is making an evaluation of the proposition. The person is saying, I believe that to be the case. The theist says, I believe that it is the case that God exists.
But that's not the only position a theist can have.
But that's what I'm not following you because
this is what I'm saying.
What do you mean that's not the only position the theist can have? Either the theist believes God exists or the theist does not believe God exists. It's one or the other. There's no middle ground there.
A theist believes God exists. A theist believes. Okay.
Okay. So you agree there's no middle ground between I believe and I don't believe in classical. Now, again, in other forms of logic, there's different, and I have on my blog weird variations of this, but we're going to be sticking strictly with classical. I believe or I don't believe. Okay.
Yeah, got it.
So if you take that same proposition and you change it to God does not exist, you don't affirm that either, right? Personally.
I do not affirm that God does not exist.
Okay. So in philosophy...
Wait. To be honest about my position.
Mm-hmm.
See, I'm still a little bit hazy on the word affirm. I don't understand why we can't use...
Affirm means you think is to be the case, or belief, or... What word... Again, these are conceptual things. I don't care what words people use. People think that for some reason I'm trying to convince people that you have to use a word a specific way. No. My argument has 6 years has always been this is how it's typically used in philosophy, but context is where it matters, not the terminology.
Great. So how about, just for clarity, how about we get rid of affirm?
What do you want to call the position that says the proposition's true? Pick anything you want. You can make up a word. It makes no difference. Again,
words
are symbols.
The word believe. How about we just go with believe?
Words are, but you realize that words have no intrinsic meaning. Words are just symbols.
That, but you said
they're signifiers, is what they are.
You said
they signify something.
What's most important is that we understand the concept. So now we have a new word. Okay. Where I'm a little bit hazy on the exact.
Think it's a new word.
So let's pick a different word if it still helps the conversation.
Affirm, think, believe. I
just said
believe. Okay, before you were against the word believe. Now we're going back to believe. Okay.
The word believe.
All right. So the theist believes there's a God. Okay, but again, now if the proposition is God does not exist, would you agree that if you affirm that, you are an atheist?
You're still using the word affirm.
Okay, sorry. If you believe that, you're an atheist.
If I believe a God does not exist, I'm an atheist.
Okay. Now, if you don't affirm that, you're a weak. You're a weak theist. Would you?
You're
would
still
you agree?
using the word affirm.
I believe. I'm sorry. I just have it. So if you don't believe that, you are a weak theist.
Not necessarily.
Then you're being not consistent.
Say that again. Please say it again so that we're clear.
If the proposition is God does not exist,
God does not exist,
and you do not believe that,
and I don't believe that,
you are a weak theist. By the same token, if you don't affirm, or you don't believe the proposition,
no, I can be an atheist. Because
if
someone
doesn't affirm that, it does, in your view.
Please, let me say something. If someone makes a proposition that a God does not exist, and I don't believe that proposition, I can still be an atheist, because that's positive.
I'm fine with that, but you're missing the point. You're also still what you are is you're a weak atheist, and you're a weak theist if you don't affirm either one. This is going to get into the crux of this. When the third epistemic position that we talked about, what's called suspending judgment, is where you say, I don't have a position on the proposition. I don't believe that's true, and I don't believe that it's false. That's called agnostic on P. Do you agree with that? That's generally what it's referred to.
Wait, I'm sorry. Very sorry. Say that again, because I feel like we're on a different thing now.
When you suspend judgment, which means I try to evaluate a proposition, and I can't reach a conclusion, and I say I do not believe that the proposition is true, and I do not believe the proposition is false.
We are on something different. We've moved away from believing a proposition, because we've had two very clear propositions, and I'm not trying to be a pain in the ass, but we've had two different propositions. One of those was a God exists. The other proposition was a God does not exist. Those are two positive
All right,
propositions.
let's frame this in one